My name is Eamonn Gormley. I'm a native of Lurgan. I currently live in San Jose, California, and I'm still interested in life in Lurgan. My family is all still there, and I notice a lot of changes every time I go back. I notice what's different, maybe a lot more than people who live there, because the changes are a lot more obvious when you've been away for even as long as a year. And I find that planners and policymakers and leaders in Lurgan and in places like it in Ireland, North and South, are repeating a lot of the same mistakes that were made here in California in the 1960s and 70s in terms of urban planning and transport planning. And I think there is room for improvement in the way we plan our towns and cities in Ireland.
Well, the whole debate, it raises its head every so often. It seems to have got extra impetus in the last few weeks, particularly because I think of a track breakdown and longer queues than usual. Was it unusual for you to see the debate raising its head again, or was it to be expected?
Only to be expected. This is not a new debate about the level crossing in William Street. It has been an inconvenience for quite some time. The railway has been in Lurgan for over 100 years. It's not a new thing. I think what's changing really is not so much increased train service. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is increased car ownership and increased car dependence, and too many journeys being made by car that could possibly be made by other means.
You'll hear the counter argument for that. I have a car. I live one side of the tracks. I have to use this car. Uh, are you kind of a denier of someone's right to use a car, or what's your thought on that kind of argument?
I think the fact that you have to use the car is describing the same problem that I'm describing. The fact that in a town like Lurgan, not a huge town geographically, you got to remember the whole point of towns and cities for thousands of years, ever since the Babylonians or whoever it was in the Middle East who invented living in cities, the purpose of living in a town or a city was that everything you need would be close at hand. All the people you need to deal with, all the business you need to get done throughout the day would all be conveniently accessible. And as you know, the Babylonians did not have access to automobiles. They certainly didn't even have access to horses. The common man, ordinary people didn't have access to horse-drawn transport in those days. So everything was built close together. So your stores, the markets, wherever you bought your goods, your workplace, everything was very close by. If you were a carpenter in some Middle Eastern town, your commute was to go down the stairs into your workshop. This idea of living in one town and commuting in another, living in one town and working in another, and then commuting between the two towns every single day, that's a fairly recent development in human history. So I don't have a problem with people owning cars. We own cars here in our house. We use them too. My problem is cars being the given the only available tool for the job when it is not necessarily the best tool for the job. So for example, you can't drive a car to Hawaii, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't build any roads. You can't take a ferry to Athlone, doesn't mean we shouldn't build any ferry ports. You can't fly a plane from Crook Park to O'Connell Street, doesn't mean we shouldn't build any airports. There's a place for the car, there's a place for the aircraft, there is a place for the bicycle, there's a place for walking. And what I find in too much urban planning in California and increasingly in Ireland, North and South, is the car is treated as the default option by urban planners. So urban planners are now building houses farther and farther away. They're building housing estates in a way that makes short journeys long because of all the winding cul-de-sacs and no way to walk between them. So the towns and cities are really being built in a way that forces people to depend on the car. And there are other parts of the world in older towns and cities for people like myself who live closer to the center of town, we have more options. I have the option of walking my daughter to school, for example. Her school is just one block away. I can ride my bike to work. I can drop the children off by bicycle and then ride my bike on into work. But I'm one of the lucky few. Most people in places like Lurgan are not so lucky because of the way the town has been built. And it's not their fault. This is just the result of evolving policy over the years, which has, in my opinion, blindly followed an American development model that they should not be following.
So the people in this situation, I mean, it's easy to say, oh, either wait for change or change is going to come or it's not. And it doesn't seem that people have the attitude that it is going to change. In fact, there's a belief that traffic, particularly on the train line, will increase, and in fact, the evidence is there. The enterprise will now stop more times in Lurgan. It's not due to happen for a few months yet, so that's going to increase traffic on that line. It means more closures. What do you say to people in that situation? Surely you understand the frustration, but what do you say to them? What's the solution? Just grin and bear it.
No, there are solutions to this. The long-term solution is grade separation, which is putting in a bridge in some shape or form and eliminating the level crossings. If I had my way, the level crossings would all be eliminated in Lurgan. You should be able to just drive through. I mean, I don't think there's any level crossings in Portadown that I'm aware of. There are no level crossings in Lisburn that I'm aware of. I think Lurgan is somewhat unique in having three level crossings in one
I think
town.
there's an example or two in Temple Patrick and outlying areas where there's less traffic, less train, as it were. But
Temple Patrick's an interesting example because the level crossing in Temple Patrick is not in the middle of town and it's certainly not beside any railway station. Part of the problem in Lurgan is, first of all, the two level crossings at Lake Street and Bales Row are less of a problem than the level crossing in William Street. William Street is more of a problem than the other two crossings because it's closer to the centre of town. It's in a more built up environment. It's a higher density environment, close to the town's commercial core, and it's right beside the station. So that means trains approaching from the Portadown side are approaching more slowly, which means the barrier stays down for longer for northbound trains. And for southbound trains, and this is a real problem, southbound trains coming into the station have to stop at the station. And when they're approaching, the barriers have to close, even though the train is stopping. And the reason is because there is a danger that the train could overshoot the platform. And if the train was to overshoot the platform and go across William Street while cars are still going through, that would be bad. I've seen it happen. I have seen trains overshoot the platform here. So it is a real risk. So the barrier has to close. In Mountain View Station, that you might be familiar with on Castro Street, there's a very similar setup, similar layout. Mountain View Station is right beside Castro Street, which is the main street in the town. There is a level crossing there. Northbound trains coming in towards San Francisco will cause the barriers to close on approach. But when the train has stopped at the platform, the barriers open up again and they stay open until the train's ready to depart. Driver sounds the horn, off he goes, the barriers come down again. In Lurgan, that doesn't happen. In Lurgan, the barriers come down and they stay down until the train leaves. So I think that could be a signalling upgrade. I think TransLink needs to pick up the phone and call Caltrain and find out how do they do it. How do they manage to close the barriers and reopen them, keep them open until the train's ready to depart? So that's the low
it's
cost
almost like
solution.
just a change in etiquette within the train system, is what you're suggesting.
Signaling system problem. Yeah, that's a technical problem.
Yeah. So, do you think that would make a big difference?
It would make some difference. I think it would be it's not the ultimate solution, but it would help. But I think the long-term solution has to be grade separation. And there are other things we can do in the meantime as well that are lower cost than grade separation. Grade separation, building bridges or viaducts or whatever, is an enormously expensive undertaking. It's very much a long-term endeavor. There are multiple ways you can do it. You can raise the tracks up on a viaduct. You can dig a big trench and put the train into a trench. You can build bridges over the tracks. You can dig tunnels under the tracks. There's no simple way to do this, to be honest.
There's no
So
easy, cheap way to do this. These are major constructions you're talking about. Lots and lots and lots of money that doesn't seem to exist.
lots and lots of money and honestly, it's for a project that just does not seem to be on the Department for Infrastructure's radar. It has not been, for whatever reason, it has not been communicated to the DFI that this needs to be a priority. I don't know if that's a failing of local leadership or local people or what. I don't know why, honestly. I think maybe local people could be proactive in putting together a formal campaign to do something about the issue, for come up with concrete solutions and bring that to the powers that be, and then get it onto the agenda. Until it's on the agenda, not a whole lot is going to happen.
What's coming onto the agenda, it's coming into reality. Obviously, first of all, the increase in numbers of the enterprise stopping, which it hasn't done for quite a few number of years, and also the building and extension of the station itself. I mean, that's going to cause mayhem, surely.
Construction is always disruptive, so there's probably not a whole lot we can do about that. The station, I think, does need a rebuild. I think it's showing its age. I have certain opinions on how I think the station should be rebuilt. They're talking about demolishing the historic goods shed to make way for more parking. I don't think that's a good move. I think there's an historic goods shed that may still be intact underneath all the modern cladding there at the cash and carry. If that happened here, I think there would be an outcry that a historic building is going to be demolished, and I think there would be more pressure to preserve the building and put it to a more modern use, such as converting it to loft apartments, converting it to residential use so that people can live close to the train station, and maybe young single professionals who would like to live within a convenient commute of Belfast, that would be an attractive housing option.
Would you say that that's well known that there may be historic buildings underneath the frontage? It's a building that I remember in its early days and did have that kind of stockyard feel to it. So you reckon it's still there, and
I
could
reckon
it
it's
be
still there.
protected? Is what you're saying?
I think it should be. I think it should be a listed building if it's not listed already. I think Ulster Architectural Heritage might have something to say about that.
And once again, it's going to delay anything forward. So the progress that we're asking and expecting and seeing budget going into might either be held up or squeezed out of existence again. And we're back to not even square one, surely.
Well, I think the plan for the station is flawed because the thinking behind it seems to be expanding more parking at the station, which is the wrong way to think about this, especially a station like Lurgan, which is in the middle of town. It seems to me that the Department for Infrastructure or TransLink or whoever is pushing for the station redesign or rebuild, every solution they consider seems to be car shaped. And again, we're getting back to this idea of using the car as the default option, the idea that in order to make the station more accessible, you have to increase the amount of car parking at the station. I think that's the wrong approach. I think that if I were TransLink, I would have people doing market research every morning for a week or for whatever long it takes, asking people on the platform while they wait for their train, where did your journey originate? What is your final destination when you get to Belfast? And you could plot a heat map of where people are coming from in the town. And if there's a cluster of people leaving Tegnavon at 7:30 in the morning and going to the station and driving 30 cars to the station, run a bus from Tegnavon at that time of the morning where the demand exists. I think there needs to be a bit more joined up thinking within TransLink, because the whole point of TransLink supposedly is that you have rail and bus operations under one roof where you can coordinate the two. I don't see a whole lot of coordination between the two. I don't remember all the years I lived in Lurgan, I don't remember ever there being a bus service specifically designed to get people to the train station.
I know that such a situation exists in Uri, a very different situation. It's remote from the town, and in fact, there's regular buses upwards and there. So there's some sort of precedent in that sense. Is it the same solution that might offer hope and help to people bringing their kids to school, which is a big factor in all of it, and you understand the desire to do that? Is there a solution there somewhere within TransLink's brief or otherwise?
And fun fact is, I remember when I went to St. Paul's School in Francis Street, I remember kids walking home to Kilwilkie along the railway line, which obviously they're not supposed to do. I very much doubt that that would be allowed nowadays. Um, but I do remember distinctly that whenever school got out, about 4 o'clock, at the back of 4 o'clock in the afternoon, remember St. Paul's location in Francis Street, it's the middle of a built up urban area. There's not a whole lot of parking, not a whole lot of room for people to pick their kids up in cars. And in those days, very few kids were picked up in cars. The vast majority of kids came out and just walked. to where they were going. We walked up the town to get buses from the centre of town. They would come out in droves, spilling out into the Shankill estate and up Francis Street and up the underpass up towards Tegnavon. People walked in big numbers to school in those days. And I think we need to get away from this idea that children need to be dropped off at school in a car, as if that's the only way to get them to school. There are other alternatives. And I think that the more you build the environment around accommodating more automobile traffic, the less comfortable and frankly, the less safe you make it for anybody walking, which then further discourages people from walking. And you get into this big vicious circle of parents afraid to let their kids walk to school. So they end up driving and it creates more traffic, which makes it more dangerous for anybody walking and so on. So to your question then, I don't know if TransLink would be. I mean, TransLink have run bus services to schools before. In my day, they certainly did. There was always a fleet of buses ready to pick us up from St. Michael's to take us into the middle of town at the end of the day. So that's something TransLink could contribute to. But I really think the DFI and I think the ABC Council really could do a better job of their planning when it comes to new housing developments. For example, there's a new housing development, I think, going in at the back of, you know, where you go up Cornakinniger Road past the old St. Michael's, you go left down the hill. I think there was a housing development supposed to go in there on the left. I don't know if it's done yet.
And there has been, and it's continuing. It's just one of many. It's another aspect that people there are concerned about from a traffic point of view is to see the opening of a brand new school there, St. Ronan's, which will mean maybe 1,500 to 2,000 pupils. So you're suddenly making another area very, very busy for traffic.
But what you could do is, if that housing development were built the right way, two houses at the end that maybe back onto the St. Ronan's campus, leave a 3 foot gap between them, put a gate in the fence, and let the children just walk. So the cul-de-sac would be a dead end for cars, but pupils could walk on through. If you think of St. Patrick's School in Common, there are houses there in McGravy Park where you can almost literally see the blackboard in one of the classrooms. But in order to get to that school, kids have to double back on themselves and go back out onto a busy main road and walk up to the front entrance of the school. So a lot of these cul-de-sacs, you know, they're well intentioned. It's designed to stop cut through traffic, but it also prevents pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic from getting through. So again, it creates more car journeys. It's one of these examples of urban planning that makes short journeys long and makes people more likely to take the car. So I think a bit more joined up thinking in terms of how we plan our new housing developments would be in order.
Well, let's come back to. You have a point. You have a point.
Yeah, it's about allowing what you call filtered permeability, is what they call it in the trade. So, for example, say you have two back-to-back cul-de-sacs. I can think of two actually in Common. I can't remember the exact names, but they're in around the back of the corner house there. There's one behind the corner house and there's one in behind the chapel. And these are two cul-de-sacs that meet like this. But if you have a friend at the end of one cul-de-sac who wants to visit his friend in the other cul-de-sac, their houses may be adjacent. They may be only a few feet apart. But in order to get from one to the other, they have to come out onto the main road and make maybe a quarter of a mile journey just to get to the house next door because of a lack of joined up thinking and how these housing developments fit into the bigger picture of the urban fabric.
Well, we started talking about railways. It's expanded to other planning issues, and thank you for your thoughts on that. I want to bring you back finally to where we basically started, particularly with the introduction within months of further stops by the enterprise. Is it all negative with this building of traffic with the enterprise? What's your take on that?
It's a boon for anybody travelling to Belfast or Dublin, and it's a huge plus for the town because it plugs the town into the National Railway network. So it's a huge positive from that point of view. But I get it, there is an inconvenience that comes with it, and I think we can mitigate the inconvenience.
Well, Eamonn, thanks for your insight. If you're listening and have views on this, whether they're similar or differing, please get in touch. We'll give you the details at a later point in the programme. Eamonn, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Donna.